Is Jerry, Stephen A., actually the most to blame for what a disaster this team is right now?
No, I'm going to blame right now. I'm going to blame Mike McCarthy because he's the one that hired Mike Nolan. I think that even though Mike McCarthy is the head coach, bottom line is he's got an offensive background. And offensively, they're the number 3 ranked offense in the National Football League. They're number 1 in yards. They've got the number 1 passing attack. They've got to get Ezekiel Elliott together because I don't think that he's been his best self. And they've got the 23 ranked running attack. But in the end, offensively, when you look at the numbers that they're putting up, I'm just looking at the numbers right here. They've scored 40, 31, and 38 over their last 3 games, so we can't sit up there and blame their offense. You can blame Jerry Jones, I understand, because the buck stops with him. But when you hire a head coach, it's kind of wise to let the head coach have the personnel that the head coach wants to have. And Mike McCarthy is the one that decided to take Mike Nolan off the scrap heap. He hasn't been a defensive coordinator in the NFL since 2014. In 2014, when he was with the Atlanta Falcons, they were the 31st ranked defense. There's a reason over the previous 6 years he has not been a defensive coordinator, but somehow, some way, Mike McCarthy decides to take care of an old buddy, and that guy ain't even on the sidelines talking to the players. He's upstairs in the booth, detached from everything, and they don't have a damn thing to do, in all likelihood, with COVID-19. He just wants to operate from the booth, but it ain't working. And this is the thing. I think you have to make a move now because over the next 3 weeks, the Cowboys play the Giants, the Arizona Cardinals, the Washington football team, and then the 4th game would be the Philadelphia Eagles. At least 3 of those 4 games, you know what, you can be fooled because they might have suspect offenses. Your defense might fool you into thinking it's relatively decent at that moment in time, but that ain't going to cut it. I think when you see the first 4 games of the season, the Rams, the Falcons, the Seahawks, the Browns, you've seen all you need to see to know that this defensive coordinator has no business in this job. He should not be there, and they need to get rid of him. I'm going to put that on Mike McCarthy. Jerry Jones did not hire this defensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy brought him in. I'm going to put it on Mike McCarthy because of Mike Nolan's existence.
No, it's Jerry Jones. You know what the problem with Bill O'Brien's situation was, Stephen A.? The power play he made to go from coach to coach and GM. As a coach, he was okay. He wasn't setting the world on fire, but he was okay. He was good. He was at least average, let's say, maybe a tick above. But then he became GM. And the problem is, really, they needed to fire the GM. If only he could have fired himself as GM, maybe he could have saved his job as coach. But I guess you can't really do that, can you? But you know what Jerry Jones can do as owner? He can fire the GM. And that's what needs to happen. It's not that Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones together are a bad GM. They're not. If anything, they are a tick above average. I talked about this last week. They average over the last 10 years about 8.5 wins, 7.5 losses, 8, a little bit even more. So it's like they are not even a game above 500 in most seasons. But that's pretty good. It's a competitive league, and considering you don't really have the credentials to be a GM, it's amazing that you can do that well of a job in a league that competitive. But that's why they're nothing special. Year in and year out. That's why, Stephen A., you say no matter what, they'll let you down. But they don't have a real GM, one that's been battle-tested and has proven that they can be elite. And Cowboys are supposed to be America's team, right? Like, why won't Jerry do it? The reason is his ego gets in the way. It's not until Jerry really feels like maybe he sees the end approaching, or who knows, and thinks at his age, as Steinbrenner finally did maybe, at his age, it's more important to win than to win his way. He's still trying to win his way. That's what the hiring of Mike McCarthy was about. Mike McCarthy was out of the league. He had no one banging down his door to get a job. I just brought this up the other day. Then the Cowboys packaged him after they hired him as a guy who really did soul searching. Now he understands analytics and all. Oh, come on, man. You took the best name brand coach you could get, who you could push around. That's what that hire is about. You're never going to be a Parcells or a Jimmy Johnson again. It's never going to be a guy who, if they win, is going to take some shine away from Jerry. Stephen A., that's why we have this mess in Dallas. Every year you look at the roster, you see talent, but it's a leaky boat. If it's not one thing, it's another. And you know what happens to average-ish teams like the Cowboys? You know, they win 12 games one year, but they lose 12 games another. And this looks like one of those other years.
Well, I get where you're coming from, but the bottom line is, again, if you might have decided to change things just a little bit by letting your coach pick some of his staff. You know, he's bad enough. He kept Kellen Moore. You were happy about that. That's what you wanted him to do. But you let him bring in his own defensive coordinator. I'm looking at how bad Jalen Smith has looked for the Cowboys. He's not that bad. Schematically, he's been out positioned. Now, they've got Awuzie, they've got Anthony Brown as your cornerbacks. They've been out. They've been injured. Obviously, Sean Lee, Leighton Vander Esch, they've both been injured as well. So we understand that injuries have compromised things, and you know you gotta make some adjustments, and sometimes that means putting people out of position and not in the best position to succeed. We get all of that. But in the end, talk to anybody in the NFL and they will tell you that there's a huge, huge problem with Dallas's defense, schematically, if nothing else, and that Mike Nolan is at the heart of that problem. And so to me, if this were a Mike McCarthy issue in terms of him directly as the head coach and some of the decisions that he was making, if this were players that Stephen Jones and Jerry Jones elected to sign, and it was just that simple, that would be something different. But this is a situation where you literally point to Dallas's coaching staff, mainly its defensive coaching staff, as being a huge, huge problem for this team. I don't know if I can put that on Jerry Jones. I really don't.
Well, I mean, I know you're right in the details. You're not wrong in the details, but that's my point. These are just the latest details. There'll be other details going forward.
What's
if you hire retread coaches, and that black cat is the owner wants to be the GM, and I get it. If I owned a major franchise in a sport and I thought I could do a good job, and by the way, Jerry and Stephen Jones are good enough to fool themselves into thinking they're the right hires for GM. They do a pretty good job, but it's not good enough if you want to win a championship.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.